You're as alert as you look. It's not too early, so we can get going. Welcome to the McKee Learning Lunch on, what is the title? The Effectiveness of Environmental Learning. Yeah. What is that? Take your 3x5 card and write whatever the first question that comes to your mind relative to the topic we're discussing. We haven't talked about it yet. Just write down whatever question comes to mind as you look at that topic. Okay, looks like we're finished with assignment number 1. This is a college, university, so this is a class. So you have to have assignments, right? Okay. I'm Jim Tucker. And I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to have a conversation, talk about the topic as it relates to a number of different areas of interest. I'm going to start with a personal story. Before I was born, I'm told, my mother and father used to take walks out into nature and the woods at least once a week. That was in central Illinois. We now know from science that had an effect on me. A very positive effect. We're learning about that. And that's one of the things that influences today's topic. When we begin to learn about the environment and the effect that it has on us, both timing and content. I'm also going to be sharing with you much more speaking because the optics aren't working too well. But I will begin with a statement, a quote from Albert Einstein. Good place to start, wouldn't you say? Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. Isn't that interesting? Smart man. But we didn't pay much attention to that element of his smartness. So back to my mother and father. They intuitively apparently knew that. Because then I was born and we moved to Georgia. My first memories are from Calhoun, Georgia, in the woods, where we lived and where, again, we spent a lot of time walking around in the woods. Every week, several times, I would be carried and then toddled into nature. Now, I know in the title of our session, the word environment was used, and we did that on purpose. But the word that comes to mind informally is nature. Out in nature. Nature is the environment. I didn't want to use the word nature because there are so many misconceptions about nature. Well, that's just about nature. Well, we're not talking about a simple quality called nature. Nature study. Well, we're not really talking about that. We're talking about an environmental impact on every one of us that we, for the most part, have not been aware of. And that's what we want to kind of discuss. As I grew a little older and began to experience nature, the environment, I began to interact with father and mother in nature. And that's when my passion became real. There was a difference in style between my father and my mother. We were all out there together, including finally my little brother Dean. And we would be walking along through nature, just enjoying the blue sky and the green leaves, as we will discover in a quote later, was health producing. Did you know that? Did you know it's actually healthy to look at the blue and the green of nature? Well, we didn't know that. We just enjoyed it and became healthy. And as we would go through the woods or down the trail or along the railroad track or wherever it was that I can remember, my father would almost always start something. It would be relatively quiet, for the birds were singing and animals were running around and bugs were squeaking. And my dad would suddenly say, "Jimmy, Dean, come here. Here's something different." That was the phrase. Here's something different. Now you tell me why we immediately ran to his side. Why? Curiosity. What causes curiosity? M word. Oh, M word. Motivation. Yes. We were motivated. By the way, motivation, in my professional view now, these many years later, is the first principle of effective learning. We are all born motivated. Now, some of us have that motivation squelched or at least limited for all kinds of reasons. But that's what my dad would say, and he didn't know what it was. Might have been a bug, might have been a flower, might have been anything, but it was out there in the woods. Come here, here's something different. And we would run over and check it out. Wow, look at that. What is it? Well, we didn't know. Here comes mother. A new role. Well, what's the phrase? Look it up. Let's look it up. So it was to the books to satisfy our motivation. The motivation was first, the books came later, because they satisfied the motivation. Does that make sense? There's a logic to that relative to learning. And that's kind of what's behind the topic. Environmental learning. Motivation, look it up. And then, after you look it up, you use it. You apply it. You make sure what you're seeing is really true. And that's called experimentation, science, research. It all starts with motivation. And for me, it all started in the woods and still works. It still works. As I'm going through the world, not just the woods anymore, I can't help it. It's my father's fault. I'm always looking for what? Something different. I just can't help it. It's a plague. And now I know that is the basis for a lot of value that I have in life. Now, I was going to show some of these things to you on the screen, but you're going to have to, and I only have like 2 or 3 more minutes. So I'm just going to show you that here is a stack of printouts of scientifically demonstrated findings. And I'll read you the titles, because that's all you need. Flourishing in Nature. This comes from the International Journal of Well-Being. A review of the benefits of connecting with nature and its application as a well-being intervention. Sounds interesting. Well, we can make copies if any of you are interested. Next one. Nurtured by Nature. Psychological research is advancing our understanding of how time in nature can improve our mental health and sharpen our cognition. Have we heard a lot about that? Next one. Can't resist this. Forest School. Now I'm going to make a local notation here. I had it overhead, but the Forest School history. The first forest school was created by Ella Flautau in Denmark in the 1950s. That's 60 years, not very long ago. Well, guess where the Global Forest School Teacher Institute is located?
New York City.
What?
I'm just guessing because it seems the way you're saying it that it was not in a forest.
Well, maybe. But what town is it located in? The forest. Anybody know? There's one person in here that knows, because she started it. What? You know, but it's not you. But we know who. Yeah, Jean Lamina. Raise your hand, Jean. She is one of the global authorities on Forest School. How many countries have you been in? Yeah, that's what I should have asked it that way. Yeah, all over the world. You've been in China. You've been in Korea. Yeah, we are the center, and in Chattanooga, and we have our own Waxahachie Forest School, and there are a number of them growing up around us. When you look online, if you Google it, you'll see a map with all the forest schools all over the place.
And in public schools.
And in public schools here, yes. All right, I'm going to have to quit because I don't want to limit your time, but I want to read just the titles. Bringing Nature into Treatment. Ecotherapy is gaining traction as a means to help people tap into nature's therapeutic powers. Of cricket chirps and car horns, the effects of nature sounds on cognitive performance. 40-second green roof views sustain attention. Just seeing a green roof keeps your attention more than not seeing it. Nature and mental health, an ecosystem service perspective. Finally, I'm going to read a quote. If I find it. Oh, here it is. This is a quote, and I'll close with this. This comes from Helen Keller. Do you know who she is? Now, what in the world can she have to do with nature? She couldn't see, and she was deaf. And this is her quote. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. That's where we are. We're at the beginning of a global exploration of what we can benefit, how we can benefit from the environment. Now, as a result of whatever you all come up with today, we're going to produce a report, and it'll be available to everyone online, as will this video. And we'll start now. The next assignment is for each of you at your tables to discuss the 3 questions. Now, I think you have a handout with the 3 questions listed in the. But before you do that, you need to assign one of your members as a recorder. And you need to assign one. The questions aren't there? Oh, they're on the handout. I'm sorry. You get the handout, and then you have the questions. and it's coming around. But you have another assignment to make. A reporter. Because we're going to bring the representative from your table up to the panel here, and we're going to get the views of everyone about each of these 3 questions. So your reporter will put it together on the paper, and your recorder will put it together on the paper, and the reporter will then share it with everyone, and I will take care of that when the time comes. Is there any question what you're supposed to do? First, you assign a what? A recorder. Then you assign a reporter. And then you get together and talk about, but we come here for lunch. So before you start any of that, we're going to have lunch. Thanks to the McKees, and we actually have a McKee here today. And where would that be? Where would the McKee be? There he is, Rusty McKee. Hold your hand up, Rusty. There. We thank him for lunch today and for the opportunity to have this kind of a discourse. All right. Let's first of all meet our people. If you will introduce yourself, and just say whatever you want to about your group.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christina Craig. I'm a third-year graduate student in the school psychology program here at UTC, currently completing my internship in Bradley County Schools. At my table, we have Dr. Tucker, the other Dr. Tucker, Terry Davis, and then Gracie Smith. So a really nice representation of the community with local members and, I guess, university-related staff.
My name's Jeremy Bramblett. I'm at UTC in the Department of Biology, Geology, and Environmental Science. I'm a senior lecturer and associate department head. I was at a table with my department head, Gretchen, and with Courtney, who is with Cumberland Presbyterian, and Bengt Carlson, right? And Bengt is associated with experiential learning at UTC.
I'm Ed Davis, science teacher, Washington Alternative Learning Center. Been there about 6 years. At my table, I got the exceptional ed teacher at Washington, Mr. Vincent Dean. I have Dr. Bradley, one of the professors here, science, environmental, maybe doing some chemistry type stuff, physics maybe. So I know science, right? What the areas? Okay. Dr. Bradley's there. And then there's Allie Wilson, formerly Allie Davis, the Davis Connection. So she's a graduate student in psychology. I think she's performing well for Dr. Tucker. And everything's going smooth, good conversation, and I approve this message.
My name is Monty Murdoch. I'm the director of a Master's in Outdoor Ed program at Southern Adventist University, where we make Rusty's products. You come to our campus, I can tell you what day of the week it is by the smell of which Little Debbie's are being made. At my table was Sarah from Bridge Outdoors, and Jeff, who is Mr. Outdoors, I guess is the way I would describe Jeff.
I'm Jean Lamino, and I'm a teacher. And I owe what I'm doing now with Forest School to Dr. Tucker and to Scylla. I took my doctorate through the leadership program at Andrews University a few years ago, Jim. And Jim was certainly a huge influence on my life and in my choice of what I did, going into the especially nature-based education. So my table is Paul Dixon from Ivy Academy, right? I'm sorry, I didn't write names down, so I'm going to do my best here.
Ryan.
Ryan. And you are the principal of the elementary. And Valerie Rutledge, who is the director of, head of the, your chair of which department? I'm sorry. Thank you. And tell me again what you do.
Philosophy and environmental studies professor here at
UTC, okay. And then Rusty McKee, who we have some connections over the years. I'm glad I get to see you in person, Rusty. A very astute group. Thank you.
Okay, so our panel is representing everyone out here in their discussion. I'm going to ask each of you in the same order to give a summary of, and we'll take the questions one at a time. But this is actually going to be in the form of a discussion, and everyone in the audience is invited, not required, but invited very positively to intersect or to be involved in the discussion, either in support of what is reported or in some alternative view. So this is a discussion that involves everyone. But we will get the substance of each question, first of all, from the panel rep. Okay? Okay, Christina, what is environmental or nature-based learning?
So my group had a great discussion, kind of talking about first like the differences in what we perceived that word as meaning. But initially we thought, nature-based and environmental learning were separate and kind of differing thoughts or ideas. But we were able to see and throughout our discussion kind of connect and integrate those ideas a little bit better. So environmental learning, we said, was intentional interaction with whatever space you find yourself in. And so kind of that intention with learning, paying attention, observing, reflecting on, but also using the environment to inspire or spark your desire to learn. And so kind of talking about how different people might have different environments that they're interacting and working and learning from, but everybody can have their own unique experiences and opportunities to kind of have that learning through the environment, whether that's outside or, in your parking lot outside of your elementary school looking at trees, or just sitting in nature and trying to use the natural benefits, mental health benefits of being and kind of having that cognition boost or increase because you have that exposure to natural light or the green colors or sounds that are therapeutic. So that was kind of where we landed for environmental or nature-based learning.
Okay, our group, some of us are Gen Xers, and we talked about as we were growing up, we would go play outside. Our parents would just say, go outside and play. And so we would learn from our experiences in nature, wandering around the woods, maybe even working in your father's wood shop, right? Learning about nature that way. And more formally in our department, so biology, geology, and environmental science, a lot of our upper level courses, they actually go in the field to, collect insects or collect rocks or collect fossils. And so we viewed that as, environmental, nature-based learning. We didn't come up with a formal definition. And I had a question about this. So when I read the initial email, I wondered if, does it have to happen outside? Could you bring natural objects inside? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but recently
What do you all think?
Okay. Because I went to second grade classrooms a few weeks ago and brought fossils. And the first question I got from every kid, and I'd get it every time, is this real? And I had a lot of casts, and I did have a few real fossils that weren't casts. And they weren't interested so much in the, casts of a T-Rex tooth or whatever, but they really wanted to touch what was real. And I found that kind of interesting.
Don't you think that wanting to know what is real is basic to our personality? It's important. I think that's what kids should ask. Is this real? Were you lying?
Right. It's so close to the real thing.
Yeah.
The casts, you can study them and get a lot of information from them.
Okay, I could segue on that. Being at the table with Dr. Bradley, he had a name for bringing the nature inside. It's called biophilia. So if it's not outside, you can, bring it inside, or if it's outside, you can, just make a diaspora of like the ant farm, spiders in like an aquarium. We even talked about in my house, my wife has 3 fish aquarium. I got one in my man cave. So all this stuff is outside, but now we can just have it inside and view it, And some people have even like bird cages, or now a bird cage for the birds in a tree, and the bird would naturally gravitate. Now he's like particular birds living in your backyard. So yeah, that was already brought up. That was a good point. And then we talked about what exactly is environmental learning, and it was pointed out learning how humans fit into nature itself and how humans relate in the environment to the nature, surrounded by nature. So learning outside, studying the trees, insects, just being totally interested in the opportunity and the curiosity of everything that you're seeing outside. And as Dr. Tucker mentioned earlier, that's what gets the kids interested in learning and motivated in learning, is curiosity. So it's not just sitting in a bland room, no windows, and stuck maybe on the Chromebook. Now you take them outside, all these different things. It's moving, it's sound, it's noise. So that's very, very motivating and brings out that communication. So that's basically summed it up.
Well, the pickings are starting to get thin as we head down here.
We'll
At
go
our
the other
table,
way with the
so we
next
don't
sentence.
repeat and look like we're plagiarizing.
We'll go the other way when we go to the next question.
It's fine. At our table, I started the question/debate a little bit in terms of, to me, there's a difference between environmental learning and nature-based learning. Because I was like, well, environmental learning can be like learning about the environment, but you never go outside. But we appreciated that environmental learning was clarified with parentheses, nature-based. So we spent most of our time talking about nature-based learning. And some of the key points we came up with was nature being the classroom, being in nature, get out there. As was mentioned earlier, you can even see nature in your parking lot or that abandoned lot where the trees starting to grow out of the asphalt. And that nature-based learning is immersive in nature.
So we were definitely focused on children in our discussions for the most part. And we defined it as child-led, which this is a forest school philosophy, and I think it is really the framework for all nature-based education with children, that they are the ones that are leading the exploration, and we're there to guide them and facilitate them. Phenomenological, did I say it right? Makes you aware of the world around you. So phenology, we call them phenology journals in nature schools and forest schools, where children are really paying attention to what's happening every day. And Jim, what's different? What's different every day? Oh, I just heard the first whatever bird, today. This wildflower just bloomed today. Those kinds of things. But really becoming more aware and also connecting it to ourselves, so that nature and the person become connected. Outdoors engagement with a place. And so for school language, that's place-based education. So children are learning to know that place really, really well and becoming connected in such a way that they form a friendship that develops into a love of the place because they know them. They know the animals and the plants, and they know each other better in that space too. In all weather, throughout all the year. And that's an important piece because seasonally based studying is very also key to this kind of learning for children. That whatever the season presents, that's what the children are going to be interested in. So it's a wonderful way to, if you're a teacher, to kind of organize what you're planning to do with the children because it all revolves around what's happening in the season. All weather helps them to become resilient, helps children make another connection with that place. When you're outside in a place in the snow, and then you're outside in that same place in the winter when it's hot and humid, it creates another strong connection with where you are. I guess that's it.
Anyone out here would like to add some unique idea that you
Or something. I think it's important with environmental learning or nature-based learning to impart to students a respect for nature. Because I think most people kind of adhere to this romantic notion of nature. It's peaceful, it's tranquil, it's a place to recharge. And all of those things are true. But something I often point out to my students, you have to respect nature because nature can also be dangerous, or at least there are hazards, right, that you have to be mindful of that can be successfully navigated. So I think that was just something that occurred to. There's the beneficial, the positive, but one thing that's beneficial is being able to teach a healthy respect for them.
I would add to that too that there's the human-centered aspect of it, which is like all the headlines, all the articles that you get. How does this benefit people? But just obviously central to what we do as educators. It's how the brain help grow children and doings. But at the same time, there is that reciprocal relationship with, yes, there's danger, but there's also a fragility and there's an impact. And so they look at all the things we've introduced, for example, in an environment. Ivy Fatty, we have this, Skillard and Ivy, we have this area on the trail we call Invasive Alley. And it's all kudzu and English ivy and, all these things that we've introduced. There's all homesteads with flowers popping up that aren't supposed to be there. And so maybe have that conversation about how fate was that we are self-centered sometimes about what we want, why we want through. We do how to make these impacts, equal like that, so we can actually think environmental education and nature-based learning. Also, there's this turning away from ourselves outward, and we consider we're not alone here. The deer are bedding down here, or we're not here. The seas, the creds, these are all these creatures that are here when we're not here. We're entering into a space that's not just ours. So there's that side of it I need to support too.
So introduced plants could be seen as infections that we have to deal with in real life. Yeah. Anyone else? Were you able to, just in general, accept that environmental learning and nature-based learning are at least can be viewed as one element rather than separate ideas? because I think that's important. Otherwise, if we keep seeing nature as the ethereal and the environment as we're losing rapidly, we may lose the essence of what it's all about. Okay? Okay, question 2, and we'll start at that end.
All right.
The question is, what is the benefit of learning in and from nature?
Well, obviously, there are more than we could spend time talking about today. But these are what our group talked about: mental health and wellness, ecological literacy, hands-on learning, engaging students, fosters curiosity and motivation, gives back to nature, there's a reciprocity, benefits students and it makes them stewards. It boosts creativity. And we could also talk more about some of the like adaptability and the creativity, teamwork, problem solving. And these are the 21st century skills. And this is what children can gain from being in nature. The 21st century skills that we used to think were the soft skills, do you remember? They were called soft skills until the business leaders said, no, this is what we need. These are the kinds of people we need in our business world in the 21st century. So they are learning all of those. And the one thing that kind of goes along with what you were talking about is risk-taking. That's a huge benefit. That there's always a certain amount of risk when you're out in nature, but children learn to recognize it, assess it, and learn how to deal with it. And right now, with so many parents being helicopter parents, they're not allowed to take risk. And that's really not good for their mental development and their physical development. So risk-taking is another, I think, key benefit for being outside.
Okay. Our group came up with a few. Nature is everywhere. Okay, the benefit is you don't have to create it. It's everywhere. Place-based, so that they appreciate where they are, along with its experiential learning. Learning and from nature, becoming credible within your realm, whatever that may be. Having been a high school biology teacher for 25 years before I moved to the university level, the more I thought about it, a lot of times students were like, what's the name of this? Give me the name. And when I started out, it was like, oh, this is a northern cardinal. Oh, this is a... And then I started to realize they were just getting the name and moving on, maybe slowing them down and saying, let's not worry so much about naming this. Let's spend more time looking at it and truly appreciating that. So the appreciation of what's around. The learning skills of self-reflection and emotional regulation. When you're out in nature, it's very hard to control nature. So it goes to what you were talking about, Gene, in terms of risk-taking and evaluating and being challenged within a, I guess, somewhat safe space, although I guess you could make it an unsafe space if you chose to really challenge yourself. And then learning in nature allows you to connect with people, connect those people to nature, and help them to appreciate what's around them so they will choose to protect what's around them. As I looked at the 3x5 card that Dr. Tucker had us write questions down, I saw a quote that Sarah had on her card as she answered the question, and I said, Sarah, I had that as part of my dissertation. I used that, and it was about it's a well-known quote basically about if people don't know things, they're less likely to respect them.
So, being able to, I'll tell you, being able to like touch it, feel the texture of it, is enhances the learning opportunity. kinesthetic learning, moving, it's great to have the kids outside where they're able to just get up and move and stretch. Teachers hate to have the kids moving around inside at the elementary level, middle, and high school. The noise starts to vibrate, off the, off the walls and the ceiling, and it becomes like a major distraction. That's why at the high school level, middle school, the teachers are always like, sit down, be quiet. But now you take them outside, you want them to, move, make noise, have the experience of being outside. So that's a great benefit. Mental health benefit just helps you to get a moment of clarity. We have a teacher that, Ms. Swafford, at the alternative school, first period before anything happens in her class, she takes her kids on a clarity walk. She takes them outside, let them walk around the track, then she brings them back in, and the kids are relaxed, more focused. They're able to get a lot more done. And of course, the principal, as I discussed at the table, the principal did not agree with it. He's new this year, didn't know anything about a clarity walk. So he had the wait and see, but he didn't completely cut it off. He just wanted to see what it was about. So we had a little control group. Don't take the kids out, let me see how they act. Then take the kids out and let me compare. And it was very positive, very enlightening. And he was like, man, maybe everybody should be taking the kids out on these clarity walks. And then there's something, a little phrase that's been bannered around in the county. It's called student-to-student academic discourse. So if you bring the kid in and they're on the Chromebook all day, because we're at the alternative school, I can't lecture kids at the same time in Spanish, environmental science, wellness, German, and I might have all of them in my same class. So they're all working. There's a program set up on the Edgenuity program, and it has all these different classes on them. So, but it's just kids looking at their Chromebook. There's no interaction. But if you take them outside, now you got their attention. They're curious. Academic, student-to-student discourse, meaning kids talking to each other and talking to each other about life skills, enrichment, or it could be on a particular similar topic or course that they're taking. So that's the benefit of being outside. And then, of course, I mentioned the Chromebooks. When we're outside, it's a break. They have no connection out there. They're not getting a hotspot on the Chromebook. So now they have to put it down. And then now it's just all about nature, being outside in nature and away from the technology. Because I think some folks have their technology on even when they're asleep, 24/7. So I turn mine off when I go to bed. I don't know about anybody else, but that's how I do. Give me a break.
So we talked about going out and experiencing nature offers the opportunity to ask different types of questions, lots of questions. You can visit diverse environments that are not as restricted as an internal or an indoor environment, and that the environments are dynamic, they change. Gene, I think, mentioned seasons. So you take kids to the same location in the fall versus spring, and they could observe the differences that they see there. We also talked a little bit about geology. I have a background in geology, and one of us read, how many books was it? 18 books on the Grand Canyon before visiting Grand Canyon, and preparing your mind for what you're going to go observe. So if you read all this stuff on Grand Canyon and you go there and you actually see the stuff, it makes it a much different experience than just not doing that. We also talked about some Native American groups who discovered cycles, like a moon cycle that was 17 or 18 years in, and they would mark it with stones or something, and how incredible that was, right, centuries ago, doing that.
All right, so our group discussed that when you're in nature or, experiencing environmental learning, it causes you to be present where you are, which moves somebody to do many things. So savoring the experience, kind of back to that mental health positive psychology, savoring the experience, being in the moment, expressing gratitude. So, being grateful for what you're experiencing, and, kind of that same notion of, stepping out of what your experience is and also observing what others' experiences are. So you might, see an animal struggling and become more appreciative of what you're going through and your health and well-being because you're walking through and observing something like that. So sharing experiences of awe with other people was something that I thought was really well said. But, creating that connection and seeing something new or seeing something different is really exciting and something that we definitely benefit from. Developing observational skills, so just being able to, we talked about birding, not bird watching, but birding, I guess is the technical term. And so when you're birding and you become more experienced, you learn to pick out those details, more specifically about, the feather color or the way that their, anatomy is designed and things like that. So developing those skills and refining them by being in nature. Drawing out details, so kind of noting on that similar observational skill, and then having that sense of revitalization. So we talked about, going in and having that new experience. It makes you have kind of a novel look on the world, which can be really revitalizing and kind of bring that energy back into you if that's something that you needed before going into that nature, that experiential environmental learning. All right, that's it for that question.
Well, how about the rest of you? Any other ideas? I have a question. It's maybe political, it may be inappropriate, I don't know, but I hear you all talking about all the wonderful things that the kids are going to learn. How are you going to measure that? Because the state requires us to evaluate all of our learning in a way that we can report and compare. So what are we going to do? How are we going to evaluate the benefits that you described so eloquently?
And there are ways to do it. I did it with my yesterday. As far as starting out with the group, you had talks on them in nature. Now, it was a kid, it was adults.
It's okay.
Holiday, right? I signed an instrument that measured not only environmental ethic, but also empathy. And both show a market. There was some marketing for this in both.
Wow.
Versus beginning. So I got numbers I can, and not just numbers, but it was a documented stuff. And so I had to follow things. So the transformation that took place and know that it is real, and I was able to capture it, document.
And you published that?
I published part of it, yes.
Because that's the kind of literature I was quoting from. That's that's happening more and more all over the world.
Published part of it, and probably some more than that. It takes.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing that I published was this idea of overcoming fear. Just what I'm afraid, and we get out in nature because of nothing again. This, I had not for a few minutes, but for all those on Saturday, you say, but some of them are scared. But when I interacted with these organisms and came out on the other side, the transformation that takes place in terms of the way they describe, I think it's like I make you a fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question, Bradley, could some of those models that you created be adaptable for like middle and high school students?
Savage.
Because like in our after school programming, working with students in the outdoors, those are exactly the kinds of things that we're trying to measure. And that's the kind of stuff, funders and things like that want to know. We're all about qualitative data. We could give you pages and pages of it, but it's harder to get through.
absolutely. I'll example share and to share.
Well, that's action that could actually happen from this conversation. Yes?
And Jim, I was going to say something too about academic standards, because I know that's always a big question when I'm doing my training with public school teachers in particular. And I know what they've decided to do, which is it's beautiful. They just have a little checklist with them when they take the kids outside, and they're going check, 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 watching the children, watching what they're doing, listening to them. So many of the standards are right there, and they're being met without any teaching in particular.
Wow.
Study on that point, I think that the learning is deeper when the whole person's involved in it. If we're just a brain, all we are is brains waiting to be filled with information, and then that's, we're doing it right if that's what we are, but we're not just that. So we were talking about observation and experience as a deepening factor. Like it deepens if I'm learning something in science, then I'm going and observing. That's how scientists do science. But also, I guess is anticipating the next question, that every aspect of learning, both those that we measure and those that we don't measure in school as we go from childhood to adulthood, we benefit from having our whole person involved in it. So I think it would be really great to see maybe this exists, a comparative analysis of a school that is an intentional hybrid academic, nature-based or environmental learning environment, comparing not just test results, but also retention of knowledge, deepening of knowledge. Man, just so much there.
There's your standing.
That's it.
That's it. You have your doctorate yet?
No.
Well, that's as if that you... Come talk to me. Okay.
Hey, Dr. Tucker.
Yes.
I was thinking about, she mentioned that the teachers had a check off during their observation, but how about if something, a survey was designed, questionnaire was designed, and then we give it to the kids and
Yeah.
let them
Wonderful.
comment on exactly what they're benefiting from being in nature.
Wonderful. Yes.
Thinking about standards, and I know sometimes people, because it's pushed so much, and teach the standards, and as long as they get on the paper, then if they don't know it 10 minutes later, it doesn't matter, which isn't the purpose of education. You're not a total person. My story about going to the Grand Canyon, I know I can tell you, I won't bother you with the details of what the Great Canyon community is, and how important these just is a lot there. That I was there in 2006, and if I just read a book on geology, I couldn't have just pulled those out of my head. But I'm part of G because I read about it first and went to look for it and experienced it. And so it wasn't just checking out the standard, but it's a part of me.
To kind of add on to that, I think that something we're all kind of touching on a little bit is that the way that we measure knowledge is kind of simplified. And because it's so simplified, we're not able to extract the rich experiences that experiential learning provides. And so I had a wonderful experience in high school of going through an international baccalaureate program. And all of our assessments were papers. So part of my senior thesis in high school was to go collect water samples and look at the turbidity, and being able to study turbidity and then see what turbidity means, how messed up and, turbulent the water is. Let me know what that word is, several years, decades later. And so I think what was beneficial there is that it's a large paper you're submitting, and that takes a lot of time to do quality and accurate grading of, which is something that our mass test systems do not allow for. So I think in order to do this on a larger scale, I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is how we assess the knowledge, because I think we can all get a lot of knowledge from something. We just have to learn how to kind of put it together in a way that's objective. That's something I kept thinking about.
Okay. We're ready for question 3, which you introduced. So, question 3, and we'll start with you again, Christina.
So the areas that can be applied, areas of learning that can be applied in natural settings. We said most everything. I was kind of devil's advocate, and I was like, what about computer science? But, you know, like we mentioned, even computer science can be done outdoors in terms of taking your computer and gaining the benefits from the environment. So we said pretty much everything. So building in breaks during your day can also be a way to apply it. If you're in a very computer-based role or field, or you know, you're in a classroom setting for 7 hours a day, then, you know, taking that clarity break or that walk around the building for 10 minutes at the top of the hour or whatever that looks like for your schedule can be really conducive to productivity, but just also to your mental health throughout the day. Not meant to sit and look at a computer. That's not what our bodies were designed for. We're meant to be physical. And so kind of back to, you know, the walking, but a lot of us have physical movement needs that we're suppressing. And then that leads to one of the conversations we talked quite a bit about was medication for like hyperactivity or things like that, because we put ourselves in these environments that are somewhat artificial in nature. But yeah, that kind of sums up our conversation at our table.
So we sort of asked our question, what fields couldn't you learn from in nature? And we didn't have very many of those, if any. We said even politics. So if you think locally with the McDonald farm, you know, how is that going to be used for Hamilton County? We did, you know, come up with maybe genetics. You think about genetics being done in the lab, but the origins of classical genetics was in Mendel's garden outside, you know, counting pea plants. And some other areas, Courtney mentioned that he has a horse farm and his horses were experiencing some sort of hoof rot, right, from the wet conditions. And he consulted his brother-in-law, who is a hydrologist, how to deal with that. And he built ditches, right, to drain the fields and hasn't had that problem since. And it reminded me of the origins of modern geology and James Hutton, who was exiled to a farm in Scotland that was very wet. And he was having to clear out the ditches because of all the soil that was clogging them. And it made him think about, well, where's this soil going? And eventually it winds up in the sea. And that got him thinking about deep time. So we're just, not very much that you couldn't connect to the outdoors.
Yeah, our table kind of agreed. You can pretty much teach any subject outdoors mostly, but something to really think about that would be like really a benefit and enhancing for the particular environment. How about yoga? How about art? Not only just abstract art, but dynamic art. What about art history, philosophy? What about meditation? You get in the right environment, all of them, of course, all the core stuff is fine, but you get into some more of these elective type of subjects, and then I could just see it's going to be an enhancement, enrichment, and the life skills are just going to be tantamount. It's going to be through the roof.
When our table dealt with this question, I said, it may sound a little flippant, but everything. What couldn't be? Being the classes that I teach for outdoor ed and teachers, I get this question quite a bit. Well, you can't teach computers, or you can't, and sometimes I have to admit it's a bit of a stretch what I go to, but one time I was dealing with a person who was actually brought up computers, and I'm like, well, you deal with design thinking. Well, you can look in nature and see how there are systems in place just like the computer systems that you have to design. Another thing we came up with was social emotional learning. That goes back to self-reflection and emotional regulation. Along those lines, a lot of times when I talk to people about doing education outside, but the kids go bonkers. And I'm like, yeah, for the first 15, 20, 30, maybe a whole class period. And why is that? Because they've been bundled up for so long. But if you give them a chance to burn that energy off, they'll actually settle down and be calmer. Studies have shown that after that initial craziness, that there's this calming thing that comes along with nature, and they'll actually settle down. But sometimes as teachers, we're not willing to wait. It goes to one of the hardest things for me when I started teaching was asking a question and waiting for an answer. And that dead silence as a new teacher freaked me out because I'm like, someone's got to, and just got to wait. And so I think that goes to the social emotional learning.
I guess the first thing I thought about, we didn't talk about this at our table, but it just occurred to me. I think one of the biggest contributions that being in an outdoor setting gives to children in academic areas is rather than a shallow survey, it's a deep dive. It's a deep dive. And it's complete immersion because they're in that setting. So I think whatever they learn, whatever they are interested in, then becomes, like some of you have said, it becomes part of you. And you know that that's real learning. That is the true meaning of learning. So in forest school, we talk about emergent learning. So that is following the interests of the children, and then teachers are there to enrich and extend what the children are already learning. And truly, I can tell you from my experience now over the past few years that every single academic subject can be taught in some way, just like we've all talked about here, outdoors. And one of our favorite phrases is, nature provides the context for everything. And it really does, just like we've heard here in these examples. We talked about storytelling, critical thinking, history and culture is a wonderful connection with the place. And that's all part of place-based learning. And then, of course, those personal skills that we've also talked about. Resiliency and executive functioning is really an important one. That deep focus. We see children as little as 2 years old exhibiting that deep focus when they're out there, when they find something, and they can spend a long time just studying one particular thing.
All right, anyone want to add?
Oh, no, go ahead.
We did a book club on a book recently called Mathematics, the Human Fortune. And this was really great until this person, then Francis, does the American you know, they just said, people would say that they're intimidated, or they say, you know, I'm not a math person. Just breaks you here a lot. Actually is a real problem, because math is just the study of patterns of the world, and it's just math what we participate in all the time. And so helping people see that they actually are quite mathematical is, and just that's built into the way that the world just is. Yeah, that's some madness and increase here throughout nature. To get back to your original folk mind stuff, that's what you used to. Yes, yeah. Just a sort of a reminder, you know, computer science is done in more really math. So
It's an application of known information.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just had a quick story that I was thinking about, you know, what we're talking about, evaluation, that kind of thing. But thinking over the years, I've worked with students in the outdoors, and one of the most memorable experiences I have, you know, we take kids climbing and caving and horseback riding at Courtney's farm. Gracie works with me, but a couple of years ago, we have students from middle school through high school, and so some of our students were able to scaffold up from 6th through 12th grade with them, and we've had them for 4 or 5 years. And whenever we take our middle schoolers caving, one of the things we do is we turn off all of our headlamps, and we see how long they can remain silent in the cave. And some groups, this is 8 to 12 kids, literally, especially our boys, literally cannot go 1 second without some noise. And a lot of times, even if they quit talking, there'll be laughter, there'll be farting.
there'll be whatever. So, but we had a group of women, 10 to 12 middle schoolers, and then they've been with us long enough that we took them back to Howard's Waterfall Cave as high schoolers. And we sat near an opening where there's a big drop, and they turned all of their lights off, and we sat there, and we sat there, and we sat there, and because of like timing and bus and dinner, I had to cut them off at 5 minutes. But I almost cried that afternoon because I'd gotten to see their emotional regulation and the growth and the experience of being in the outdoors, and just knowing that they're capable, like that what they're capable of in terms of self-regulation was really, really powerful. And that's not something that's probably going to be really exciting to write in a grant report or something, but it was really moving to be a part of it and just to see the kids growing up in the outdoors like that.
Wonderful. Anything else?
I'll share something. I didn't expect to share this, but
Christina said something so very thought. What I'm going to share may not apply to any of you at all, but I just have to share because you might have connections with others, might want to start this up again, or at least others in country, I'm not aware. But is ADD and ADHD still an issue? I don't hear much about it anymore.
It's a huge issue.
All right, so I want to share something interesting. This gentleman, Dr. Senior Blondell Senior, he started a ministry, you know, that's a little bit out of this show too. And it was for young boys from probably around 11, 12, up to around 16, 17, year about. And the program was nature-based learning. It's had 100 acres, something like that, wood. And so the parents, you know, wanted their young, couldn't handle the voice, just out of use all. And so, because of all the medications, and so nature-based learning, when they started the program, the parents cannot see their young boy. The boy can't even talk to the parents. That sounds spooky, but they had to build points. The points are based on stage in the program. It was outside work program, working in nature, taking care of goats, other things, gardening. There was, of course, there's deadlines. There was no test. You could not watch anything that had blacks and whites. It's interesting. 0 for little sugar, vegan diet. So I mean, listen to other components of it. But within a period of time, it was he was a psychiatrist. So psychiatrist who over time they decreased ADHD medication to 0. If the parents, once they hit points and the parents they start talking, that was a special privilege. And then this patient by the parents, special privilege, and the boys had to work. And they want that was the motivator. If the parents stood up and they got so good they got to have they can go away on vacations with parents or bedtime with parents. The success of the program was based on the parents staying true to that environment. Outside, no tech, no low sugar, all that kind of stuff. Incredible program. Went for a couple dozen years. But anyway, he was an entrepreneur. He could never hand it on. So it program no longer exists.
That's really interesting because we were talking a lot at our table about ADHD, and I am currently seeing it misdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, kids being medicated as young as 5, even earlier sometimes. And my question was, have we done studies, and I really need to look it up to inform my practice, but have we done studies to see the longitudinal data for, if we put this kid on ADHD medicine at 5 and keep them on through their entire educational experience, and then they go into adulthood and try to stop it, what happens? We've never taught them the skills to regulate, going and moving, or, trying to stay away from things that trigger more hyperactive behavior. And so it's a really interesting thing, because I think that that's something that needs to be studied instead of teaching the skills to deal with, everybody has their own deficits or struggles, but instead of teaching the skills, a lot of times what we're doing, at least right now, is just providing that Band-Aid, and that's a short-term Band-Aid. And so that I would love to see more information on that study.
We're seeing a really giant increase in families who are putting children with neurodiverse learning issues, ADHD, in forest school programs. So they're recognizing that this is what their children need. So this is becoming a growing demographic for us.
I've got one more thing to add. So I am definitely hyperactive, definitely, and I have been my whole life. When I came home from school, because I was in a box all day, my dad would make me run around our backyard lake as many times as it would take me, and then I'd come in and do my homework, and it was effective. And my mom's like, she told me this story a couple weeks ago. She's like, you had a lot of energy. You had some very difficult energy as a child, but running around the lake really worked for you. I was like, yep, it was in nature. It was getting that energy out. So.
Anybody else?
One thing I'd like to highlight that has come up just a little bit about gardening, but I feel like it's something that is pretty common in growing in schools, is how growing food can be an excellent way to make so many connections between a lot of these different subjects that we've been talking about, with, like, of course, it's ecological and deals with soil and plants, but it's also cultural and historical in terms of, what things are grown and what areas, do they grow best in, and then, of course, preparing food. And it's, there's mental health that comes with working with the plants and the soil, but then there's also the nutritious benefit, right, that you have eating produce that you've actually grown, and then the knowledge of just how our agricultural system works. I mean, agriculture is one of the biggest ways that we impact the environment, and every single one of us eats food multiple times every day. So to make food and growing food and gardening and agriculture more central to curriculum, I think could be a great way to, because you can grow food on, a very small amount of land, as schools typically have.
On top of a building.
Yeah, or on top of a building. It could be a great way to bring, this kind of education and make it accessible. Not every school has forest adjacent to it, but you can have a garden. I think that is something that we could expand on.
Yeah.
Hey, I got another comment about the ADD, ADHD. I have the exception to ed teacher in the back there, Mr. Dean. Okay, so we had some real all-stars at the alternative school. All-stars mean that they kick holes in the wall at home and at school. They knock over desks and they throw chairs, and they're very combatant and aggressive, and they're on medication. But we had a couple of all-stars, and Mr. Dean, I guess he solved it, because we've been having this kid since September, so we had him for half a year, and I know that Mr. Dean has been taking him outside daily, and he gets breaks. He raises his hand after he does a certain amount of work in class. He raises his hand, and then he gets to go on a clarity walk. And so September, he's knocking over the coat rack. He's just out of control. And now we're getting ready to go into February. We hadn't heard a peep out of this kid in, I guess, 5 months. So I guess Mr. Dean cured him, with the walking and whatever his magic was. But I think it's mostly, once again, going out into nature. And we have these clubs at Hamilton County, some of the schools like the STEM school, Achenab Middle, and we have it at Washington Alternative. We have clubs. We have a yoga club. We have a seasonal sports club. We have meditation club. We have a walking club. So we're getting our students outside pretty much like every day, but we are a program. So I know there's the pacing guys at a lot of the traditional schools, and they don't have the time allotted. But at the program that we're at, we actually can implement it, and man, it's just doing wonders for the kids. I think, in my opinion, because they are we have them for a certain amount of time, and then their date comes where they have to go back to their home school, and the kid all of a sudden start acting up, using profanity, being disrespectful, and the reason why we figured out they don't want to go back to their traditional school. Because if you're at the club walking and kickball and the teachers are, respectful, and you got that, that nature, component, it's just enhancing. It's a good environment.
I think, too, we're talking a lot about ADHD, and it's worth mentioning that kind of having to do with what you're saying is there's so many kids who are perceived to have ADHD, and what they really have in their life is a high ACEs score, adverse childhood experiences. So a lot of trauma. And in Chattanooga, we have, thousands of kids that are living below the poverty line. And so they're coming to school with trauma that's misdiagnosed as hyperactivity. So that's probably a lot of what Mr. Dean's dealing with. And, the outdoors can be a big part of that conversation, because what our kids are learning when they're outside is those coping skills that the medication is, helping. It's helping the kids tamp down. And I have a kiddo in my house that, is on ADHD meds, and he definitely needs his medicine. But he came to live with us about 3 years ago. He also has really high trauma in his childhood. And so being outside, the more active he can be, the more sports he can be involved in, the more hikes he can go on, the better he does in school, because he's able to get all that energy out. So I think, in the conversation, the larger conversation about utilizing the outdoors for kids is like how it can really help them create those coping mechanisms.
Wonderful. Do you know?
I just want to say something real quick. I think we're about ready to wrap it up, but I just can't say enough how I'm thrilled about everything that's being shared here. And I just hope you know that you have a little opportunity. Well, I just want to encourage you, something you're already doing. That's that ripple effect. Keep pebble and keep sharing what you've shared in here, because this thing can just keep on growing and should grow. I'm unbelievably impressed and thrilled.
Yeah, thank you. Because we will now, unless somebody has something else, they just can't.
You try to get a question in for 10 minutes.
Okay, Ally.
You got it.
I was just going to say these conversations about involving these kids who are experiencing the effects of ADHD and hyperactivity are really interesting. Engaging them in their environments and considering their diet and things like that is really interesting. Because I feel like a lot of the times when kids get that ADHD diagnosis, the first solution is to get them on meds without trying any other things. And I was working in my practicum site, I was working with a kid with ADHD, and he was not medicated. And in the reports about his behavior and progress in class, all the teachers that were making notes about him was like, he's hyperactive, he can't sit still, he's distracting others, he's unmedicated. Like, that was coupled with all the negative things they were saying about him. And I thought that was really interesting, because this mom is trying to keep her kid off meds, and the teachers are like, why is she doing that? Like, what is she doing? She needs to be medicated. And I respect her for trying other things, but I feel like whatever she's trying isn't working. But I feel like there's just not enough research or not enough, I guess, conversations about how to properly try that method with kids. Besides medication, we all know about the research of medication and putting kids on ADHD meds. But if you don't want your kids on medication, what else do you do? That's not talked about as much. So I feel like these conversations are really important, and I wish more parents knew about it.
Thank you. Well, that was we'll let that be the tie-up message for the day. And we will share with every one of you the report written form and the video of the whole thing, so that you can make sure that we don't forget what we've heard today. But my final question to you would be, what are you going to do about it? We have to now act on the basis of our knowledge. And in terms of the medication, I thank God routinely that I was born before the medication time, because I would have been medicated, and I'm glad I wasn't. Anyway, we're finished, but you're not. There is one final assignment, and it's a written assignment, and she will hand it out, and this is your ticket out the door. Thank you all for coming. This has been incredibly powerful.